It's been a tough night for Britain's governing Conservatives after it lost 2 out of 3 parliamentary by-elections. The party pulled off a surprise win over the main opposition Labour Party to narrowly retain the West London seat of Uxbridge and Ruislip, vacated by the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson. But the 2 other contests in the north and west of England saw big wins for the opposition parties. Analysts say these were terrible results for the Conservatives, who have been in power for 13 years, but it could have been worse. And Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and his party remain deep in trouble ahead of next year's general election.
Understand the enormity of what has just happened. I know what an honour this is, and I am humbled by this opportunity to serve. In this campaign, we have rewritten the rules on where Labour can win. People have opened their doors to us and embraced our positive vision for the future, and thousands of the votes cast yesterday were in Labour's box for the very first time. For those of you who have put your faith in our party, thank you.
So, this message from the Uxbridge and South Ruislip residents is clear. Sadiq Khan has lost Labour this election. And we know that it was his damaging and costly ULEZ policy that lost them this election.
Well, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak was quick to hail the by-election victory in Boris Johnson's old constituency as proof that the next election was not a done deal.
Has been acting like the next election's a done deal. The Labour Party's been acting like it's a done deal. The people of Uxbridge just told all of them that it's not. Now, no one expected us to win here, but Steve's victory demonstrates that when confronted with the actual reality of the Labour Party, when there's an actual choice on a matter of substance at stake, people vote Conservative.
Arise correspondent Lape Olarinoye has been monitoring developments, and she joins us now live from London for more. Lape, thanks so much for joining us on Newsday. The Conservatives under Rishi Sunak have lost 2 sizable majority seats to opposition parties. What does this mean for the governing party nationally?
Well, it's clearly a very bad blow to the governing Conservative Party. Now, this is an addition to the number of seats that they've previously lost. Seats, actually, that they gained during Boris Johnson's tenure as Prime Minister back in 2019. They've all effectively lost most of those seats now. Now, we know that this is not a good time to be losing seats in the political calendar, particularly because the country will be going to general elections at the end of next year. And so this is not a very good omen. It's not a good forecast. But like you rightly showed there in that clip, Rishi Sunak is adamant that this is not a done deal, but it's not very much historically a good look. Now, the last time that anything close to this happened was back in the 60s during Harold Wilson's tenure, where he lost 3 seats in one day. It's not quite the same picture today because, of course, we know that the Conservative government managed to retain 1 seat, which is, of course, the notable seat that Boris Johnson has held for many years, which is in Uxbridge and South Ruislip. Now, that, of course, they retained that seat, particularly because of some of the policies under the Labour government, particularly under the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. So in answer to your question, it's not a good look for the Conservatives, but they have more than enough time, some would argue, to turn things around. But the event and the way in which things are taking shape, things don't look good just right now for the Conservative government.
Well, Lape, they managed to keep the former seat of Boris Johnson in Uxbridge. Is this significant in any way?
Absolutely, particularly because this seat has been held for a number of years. It's notable, like I mentioned earlier, to be a seat that was retained by Boris Johnson. It's in a much more rural part of London. And so there are a lot of die-hard Conservative voters there who have shown that. Once again at the polls during this by-election. Now, we know that they've managed to maintain that seat. Many have said that they've managed to maintain that seat as a result of a policy called ULEZ, which is whereby cars get fined for driving more less emission-friendly cars that pollute more into the air. that, of course, has been expanded into areas like Uxbridge and South Ruislip. And so for that reason, the Labour opposition party, of course, weren't able to snatch those votes. Now, that is not necessarily a good thing, because it means, it could suggest that if the Labour Party had appealed to that locality a little bit more, it could have potentially gone the other way. And so for that reason, if we looked at Steve Tuckwell, who won that seat, his speech wasn't necessarily crediting Rishi Sunak's work or the work of his party, but more so the errors of the opposition, which is quite telling, really. Going forward, though, I think it's very important for the Conservatives that they were able to retain that seat, which is a seat that has, traditionally voted for the Conservatives. But it's not the same picture in other parts of the country. Other constituencies further afield have also been lost in the last couple of years to opposition parties. So regardless of retaining one, it's very, very important that the Conservatives work hard, especially under the leadership of Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, to retain those 5 pledges that he made, of which, by the way, he isn't really achieving all of them in this time like he said he would, especially stuff like inflation, NHS waiting lists. The focus seems to be more on immigration, but there are other areas that he needs to improve, and his government, to be able to retain voters and campaign heavily ahead of the next election.
Well, Lape, could we see more tactical voting in the general election?
Some reports do suggest that this by-election was very tactically voted, and we could see that take shape ahead of the next general election, particularly because it does look like it's the end of the road for the Conservative government. They have been in power for the last 12 years. Unfortunately, they have had a domino effect of just tragedy after tragedy under their governance, the pandemic being an integral part of that. The economy, the cost of living crisis, of course, the war in Ukraine and the impact and the economic effect on its people as a result of that has left a very sour taste in people's mouth. Now, even something that's more pertinent to people is the way in which the NHS has been run under the governance, if you like, of the NHS. And so for that reason, they are fighting a very hard battle. And we've seen that being reflected in this by-election, where people have voted tactically. The Labour opposition party have been able to start garnering back some of their strongholds that they lost under Boris Johnson. We're seeing that there's more interest and swinging towards the Liberal Democrats, what we describe as a third strong force. And we're seeing that happening. And that can suggest that a lot of tactical voting is going on during this by-election, and that could take shape ahead of the next general election, something that could be quite damning for the Conservative government. They've been in power for 12 years, and we could see that government being shut down for the next number of years.
Well, we've also seen some criticism regarding this. Some critics are saying that these results show one thing, and that's the undemocratic UK FPTP voting system. Basically, because they're saying that minority parties have no chance in gaining a say in Parliament. What do you make of this?
Well, it's an interesting report, but historically, we can go back by what we've seen before. A couple of years ago, we did have a hung parliament, and we saw a coalition government take shape. People have different opinions on how that life was like under that, but there is a potential and there is a sense that we could see that again, which is why we're seeing an increase in tactical voting. Now, the Liberal Democrats have not been in power for decades, and we could see a potential alliance between the Labour Party as well as the Liberal Democrats. They've managed to regain some seats that they've never won before, and the Labour Party is slowly building back what we describe here as the red corridor that they once had as their stronghold, that they lost significantly under the leadership of Jeremy Corbyn. Now we're seeing under the leadership of Keir Starmer that the Labour Party is regaining its confidence and votes in those areas. And if, or we won't know till then, but if the Labour Party don't gain enough and the Liberal Democrats do, and the Conservatives lose far more, which we're seeing that trend happen, then there could be some sort of alliance between the two other parties. But it is still very soon to predict anything like that. But at the same time, the Conservative government still have a significant, just over 12 months before they can campaign and garner votes and change all those pledges that Rishi Sunak has made. There's still enough time for things to go either way. And, I never like predicting these things because anything can happen. It's politics, especially British politics. It could go absolutely either way.
Well, definitely, Lape. Thank you so much for joining us on Newsday. Our Rice correspondent, Lape Olarinoye from London.